I transmigrated to the Great Xia dynasty and was taken in by the Punishment Evil Department, a place that exclusively judges demons and monsters. For 12 years, I've endured, becoming neither human nor ghost, my hair completely white, looking as if I'm about to die. But I could hold on, all thanks to one secret. Every time I kill a demon, that shabby furnace around my neck gives me a little more life. Today, after sending off a poor wretch named Zhuang, a sudden surge of heat rushed straight to my eyes. To my astonishment, I discovered that I had awakened some sort of technique. I could see the chi on everyone. Martial artists had invisible martial chi, while cruel officials had black mist like killing intent floating above their heads. Out of curiosity, I looked at myself and saw my whole body was scarlet like blood, with countless ghostly faces screaming in blazing flames. I shouldn't have been curious about this. I am Chun Yang, the chief of the Punishment Evil Department, a head of cruel officials who has dealt with demons for 12 years beneath the Demon Suppression Department. In those 12 years, I sent away 137 demons, and also dozens of cruel torturers who couldn't hold on. Those who survived can be counted on two hands. Last night, I dreamed of Chong'an County again. Soul banners fluttered in the wind, black mist swirled like fog, and the Chun mansion was engulfed in fire. The beast roared as it chased from behind, the stench from its bloody maw nearly hitting the back of my neck. I woke with a start. I found myself slumped over a pile of case files, my sleeves soaked in ink, and a writing brush lying on the floor. It was a dream. That year, when I was 16, I had just passed the imperial exams. I was celebrating with friends from my hometown. Halfway through the banquet, a soul banner suddenly drifted down from the sky, and the next moment, demons rained down like a storm. Of the 38 people in the Chun household, only I survived. In a daze, the 8 trigrams furnace pendant on my chest flipped open, and a wisp of flame flew out. Those demons turned to ashes in the blink of an eye. Only later did I learn that this furnace was no ordinary thing. On the day of a heavy snowfall, a mad old Taoist forced his way into the Chun mansion and stuffed this pendant into my father's hands, shouting something about personally bestowed by the sage, passed down from the Grand Supreme, to vanquish demons and uphold the way on behalf of heaven. Those words sounded like they were referring to that one, so I didn't throw away the furnace. Instead, I threw myself into the office of punishing evil, trying to figure out what it really was. This stint lasted 12 years. Land in the capital region was extremely expensive, so the Punishment Bureau was built underground. The prison cells were built by Mahist masters, held in check by inscribed tablets from great Confucian scholars, and the alternation of day and night relied entirely on formations. My study never saw sunlight, with case files stacked taller than a man. At 29 years old, my hair was as white as dried weeds. My face was utterly bloodless, my sockets dark, my pupils dilated and milky. No one who saw me would think I was still alive. But I was still alive, and today I would go to see someone alive. Director Chun, Secretary Han from the Revenue Bureau has arrived. The marshal clerk knocked and announced. At the second watch, for a revenue secretary to travel all the way to the Punishment Bureau, what good could it be? In the hall, the ever-burning lamp was as bright as daylight. Han Qing was as fat as a mountain of flesh. He heaved himself up from the armchair, grinning all over, and was about to give me a hug. Director Chun, I've missed you so much. I sidestepped him, pulled a chair over, and sat down. Secretary Han, visiting late at night, let's get straight to the point. Han Qing gave a sly grin. He took out a tea cake from his storage ring, then pulled out gold leaves, and finally even produced a white jade bottle, claiming it contained 3-striped, clear evil pills. I glanced at it without moving. The more valuable the item, the hotter the matter. He lowered his voice then. Was there a demon named Zhuang who entered the Jiazi section yesterday? I nodded. Tomorrow's interrogation. Supervisor Chen only needs to ask him about the kidnapped magistrate's daughter. Han Qing leaned closer. The 1,000 silver taels have been found. No need to worry. Truly found? Magistrate Fong is an old friend of Minister Li. I took a sip of tea, saying nothing. Han Qing, seeing this, wrote the character 1 on the table 10,000 taels. I looked up. Silver. The fat on his face twitched. I remained expressionless and took another sip of tea. Over the years, every year-end, I went to the Ministry of Works to demand funds. When they made excuses, I wrote articles. The articles were sharp, cursing half the people out thoroughly, yet they couldn't retaliate. Later, people from the Ministry of Works came to complain that the Ministry of Revenue wouldn't allocate money, so I started writing article for the Ministry of Revenue. That is how Han Qing got to know me. Recently, more and more demons have entered the department, and the coagulation pills and purification pills are running out. I put down my teacup. The hard labor officials are depleted in chi and blood, haunted by a malevolent aura. With 2 meager meals a day and a bed that needs replacing, it would be even better to have a few more sets of clothes. Leave this to me, Han Qing said, thumping his chest. I'll speak with Minister Li later. Hard labor is no easy thing. We truly should be considerate. I pushed back the gold leaves, spirit tea, and damn bottles. Just have the Ministry of Revenue allocate silver. Han Qing's eyes darted, and he suddenly laughed. I've heard Secretary Chen's literary talent is extraordinary, comparable to the 5 great families of the capital. The Empress's birthday is approaching. Could these things buy a piece of calligraphy from Secretary Chen? I was silent for a moment, then nodded. He had put it so plainly that if I still refused, some people would lose sleep over it. I spread out the Chungtang rice paper, ground the ink, and soaked the brush. The moment I set brush to paper, an indescribable aura emanated from me, no longer the sickly appearance of usual days, but a literary aura. Han Qing's eyes widened. I ignored him and kept writing. As graceful as a startled swan, as lithe as a swimming dragon, resplendent like autumn chrysanthemums, flourishing like spring pines, elusive as the moon veiled by light clouds, drifting as snow swirling in the returning wind. Han Qing took the rice paper, stared at it for the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, then suddenly slapped his thigh and burst into laughter, his face flushed red. Brilliant, Director Chun. I never knew you had such skills. I only accepted that 3-stripe pure evil pellet. The rest, I asked him to exchange for scriptures, brushes, ink, and potent medicines. Han Qing hummed a lewd tune as he left. When the hall fell silent, I caught his faint muttering. He finally took it. If he didn't take it, how could I? If I didn't take it, how could Minister Li? And if Minister Li didn't take it, how could I advance? I drained the cold tea in one gulp and shook my head silently. Bureaucratic corruption. The next day, at cell number 7 of Armor Class Ward, the stone door slid open. I walked in alone. The man tied to the torture rack was covered in blood, with a hideous scar slashing diagonally from his forehead to his chin. Zhuogang. I sat down at the table, opened the Soul Purification Sutra, ground ink, and began to copy it. My first year in the punishment department, I once interrogated a demon from Armor Class Ward. My spiritual platform wavered, and I nearly died here. Since then, before every torture session, I must first copy the sutra. How much did those bastards bribe you? Zhuogang stared at me, then suddenly laughed. My brush paused for a moment, then I continued writing. I've only been practicing martial arts for 2 years. As Zhuogang, how could I be qualified for the first-class division? His voice was hoarse. To trouble the chief of the punishment office to interrogate me personally, is it because the magistrate's daughter is so precious that she's worth 100 lives? He suddenly burst into laughter, echoing in the stone chamber. Do you know how much money I stole from Magistrate Fong? 100,000 taels of gold. My brush paused. 100,000 taels of gold. Last night, Han Qing said it was 10,000 taels of silver. I thought it was just about reputation. Now I understand this isn't about shame. It's about losing my head. Let me out, and I'll split the gold with you. Zhuogang stared at me, his eyes dark and deep. I turned a page of the sutra and continued copying. Throughout it all, not a flicker of emotion crossed my face. I am merely a minor registrar. What ISNT written in the files, I simply pretend I never heard. 2 hours later, Zhuogang's human skin lay spread out beside him, the flesh stripped away piece by piece. The heart beneath his ribs was clearly visible, still faintly beating. I flipped through the completed case file. The matter was far more complicated than Han Qing had hinted. Zhuogang had once been a wastrel from Wuling Prefecture. After his family fell from grace, he was bought by a wealthy merchant due to his handsome looks. Magistrate Fong took a fancy to him and demanded him from a merchant to serve in the yamen. But outwardly, he claimed he wasn't fond of men, he just found the child pitiful. The prefect's daughter, a sweet 16, was curious to see the most handsome man in Wuling Prefecture. One look, and trouble began. By day, he served tea to the prefect. By night, he secretly met with the daughter. After a month of this, Zhuo Gung, clutching his lower back, quietly went to see a doctor. That doctor was a demonic Taoist hiding in Wuling Prefecture, plotting to overthrow the prefect. Overjoyed to learn Zhuo Gung's identity, he recruited him into the scheme. Zhuo Gung willingly became a demon. Later, the doctor's identity was exposed. Prefect Fong struck him with a palm, grievously wounding him, and chased him out of Wuling. Zhuo Gung knew he couldn't stay. He stole the prefect's years of savings, kidnapped the daughter, and fled a tale of utter rebellion and moral depravity. I walked up to Zhuo Gung, execution knife in hand. In his murky eyes, a flicker of clarity suddenly appeared. On closer look, it was relief. One slash, and he breathed his last. A wisp of white vapor rose from his head, drifting into the 8-trigram furnace on my chest. For 12 years now, every time I slay demons and monsters, a wisp of vapor enters the furnace, granting me faint benefits. If not for this, my frail body would have long given out. But this time it was different. Instead of dispersing as usual, the warmth gathered towards my eyes. After the time it takes an incense stick to burn, I opened my eyes again. The world had changed. Above Zhuo Gung's corpse, wisps of black qi coalesced into a twisted face, glaring at me with vicious intent. I removed the soul-locking nail. The corpse burst into flames, and the black qi, freed from its restraint, half dissipated and half settled upon me. With a thought, my vision returned to normal. In the following days, I mulled over this change repeatedly. During roll call, I stood aside, observing every forced laborer, every martial officer, and every demon. Above the forced laborers' heads floated black qi. Above the martial officers' heads was formless qi. Above Zhang Jiwu's head, both formless qi and black qi were present. In the middle of the night, I suddenly woke with a start. I sat up. There's a Taoist saying, qi gathers to take shape and takes different names based on the substance. All things possess qi. So the black qi was killing intent. The formless qi was martial qi. I had gained the ability to see qi. 12 years later, I had finally obtained something genuine from this 8-trigram furnace. A thought suddenly surfaced. What was my own qi like? I lowered my head, my gaze falling upon myself. My pupils constricted. I saw. The aura around me was a bloody crimson, burning like raging flames, hiding countless twisted faces, and faintly I could hear piercing screams. I froze in place, a chill running down my back. I shouldn't have been curious about this. Half a month had passed in the blink of an eye. Today, during the morning roll call, Zhang Jiwu, who was always stern and unsmiling, had a rare hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. On his weather-beaten face, there was a look of youthful triumph and pride. When the other stern officers learned that Zhang Jiwu was about to leave the punishment department, their eyes were filled with envy. In the past 3 days, very few demonic cultivators had been sent to the B section, let alone the A section. Qinyang had rarely taken a break, spending 2 days in his study reading. After the roll call, Zhang Jiwu came to find Qinyang. As he looked over, he saw Qinyang holding a book, scrutinizing it carefully. Director Chun, perfect timing. I was just about to look for you. Qinyang closed the book in his hand and handed it to Zhang Jiwu. This is the clear mind stillness technique from the Qingwei sect. I got it for you from the martial department. If you practice it once daily, within a year, it will cleanse the baleful aura from your body. The martial department, for one thing, never lacks cultivation techniques. The techniques, mental methods, and martial arts seized from destroying demonic cultivator forces are hauled by the cartload. Thank you, Magistrate Chun. Zhang Jiwu's heart warmed. He had heard of the Qingwei sect. It was a renowned Taoist mental cultivation method and swordsmanship in Daxia, truly unparalleled. Although Taoist techniques are not passed outside, it's not surprising that this mental cultivation method fell into the Demon Suppression Bureau's hands. The demon cultivators of Daxia are best at robbing the orthodox sections. The literary department of the Demon Suppression Bureau has a group specifically watching this. Once the demon cultivators finish robbing, they have the martial department members change clothes and go rob those demon cultivators. Zhang Jiwu flipped through a few pages and saw that the obscure and hard-to-understand parts of this cultivation manual all had annotations. The ink was very fresh, and he could even smell the fragrance of the ink. Qinyang's handwriting was very distinctive. He could recognize it at a glance. The words on the book were written by Qinyang. Zhang Jiwu initially thought that Chen Yang had casually scribbled a few notes out of interest while flipping through. But after looking for a while, the more he read, the more shocked he became. After the time it takes to burn an incense stick, Zhang Jiwu closed the book, looking extremely astonished. Does Director Chen also understand cultivation manuals? You should know that this cultivation manual is no ordinary common text. He was completely confused by the obscure parts, but after reading what Qin Yang wrote, he felt as if a blockage had been cleared. When this book was brought into the Demon Suppression Bureau, 100 copies were transcribed, and a master had already read it. I'm merely copying the annotations for you. Qin Yang took out the tea cake that Han Qing had given him, broke off a small piece, and while Zhang Jiwu was reading, brewed a pot of tea, pouring a cup for each person. The study was filled with a rich tea fragrance that was soothing and refreshing. I see, Zhang Jiwu muttered to himself. That makes sense. The mental cultivation method is even more profound than martial arts. How could someone who hasn't practiced it understand it? Zhang Jiwu didn't ask much about the mental cultivation method, and Qin Yang didn't elaborate. The books of this lifetime had a stronger self-study function. Where did such a selfless master come from? His eyes could not only observe qi, but also had the power to see through barriers. The annotations on the books were written by himself. Director Chun, when you left the punishment department yesterday, did you know the weather in the capital? It's deep winter, a bit cold. It snowed just yesterday. When you leave the punishment department tomorrow, you could go see the snow scenery in the capital. Qin Yang took a light sip of tea, looking satisfied. Zhang Jiwu picked up his teacup, imitating Chen Yang's manner, and took a light sip. His eyes showed slight surprise. Although he didn't understand tea, he could tell this tea was excellent, as if it could even enhance cultivation. Unlike the tea he had drunk before, which was all dregs and bitter in the mouth. I haven't seen the snow scenery in the capital yet. Zhang Jiwu turned his head to look out the window, his thoughts gradually drifting into the distance. The punishment department was a place where the seasons were constant, with no awareness of cold or warmth. Like Chen Yang, his purpose in coming to the capital was to join the punishment bureau. He wanted to make a name for himself, while Chen Yang seemed to seek vengeance. Thinking of this, Zhang Jiwu turned his head. The moment their eyes met, looking into Chen Yang's deep, abyss-like eyes, he inexplicably felt a sense of insignificance in his heart. Zhang Jiwu was silent for a few breaths, then, as if possessed, asked, Director Chen, what do you think it takes to cultivate to the top 3 ranks and become a master of the 3 marvelous realms? Deputy Director Zhang, are you asking about cultivation? Zhang Jiwu nodded silently. He had only just stepped into the threshold of the middle 3 ranks. Even with a marrow-cleansing pill, he would at most reach the 4th rank in his lifetime. Although I'm not a cultivator, I do have some insights. Qin Yang said slowly, taking out a sheet of rice paper and writing a line with his brush. Zhang Jiwu picked it up and couldn't help but read it softly. The great square has no corners, great talent matures late, great sound is barely audible, the great image has no form, the way is hidden and nameless. Yet only the way excels in both beginning and completing. After reading, Zhang Jiwu was stunned for a long time, as if comprehending something, and his breathing grew faster. When he came back to his senses, Zhang Jiwu's lips unconsciously curled up, a different light shone in his eyes, and he burst into laughter. Qin Xijing is truly a master who never reveals his hand. I'm just a minor Xijing. How can I be considered master? I only know some torture techniques. Let's not talk about it. Qin Yang shook his head. He couldn't come up with such profound words like the Luo Shun Fu. It was an act of plagiarism, relying on the fact that there is no Tao Te Ching in this world. Zhang Jiwu nodded heavily, carefully put away the rice paper, stood up, picked up the teapot, poured tea into Qin Yang's cup, sat down, and chatted with him. He felt an inexplicable sense that asking that question just now was the right thing to do. By the way, Officer Chun, why have the number of demonic cultivators sent to the Punishment Bureau of Evil been greatly reduced these past few days? Bringing up this matter, Zhang Jiwu looked puzzled. Several veteran torturers interrogating one demonic cultivator? Normally, where would they get such ample manpower? 2 years ago at this time, it seems it was also like this. If on the Empress's birthday, demonic cultivators were being sent to the Punishment Bureau in droves, that would be strange. Empress Shi? That's right. Qin Yang nodded. He calculated the date and realized that today was her birthday. He couldn't help but think of Han Qing and the few lines of verse he had plagiarized. Maybe at this moment, the civil and military officials of the court are taking turns flattering her. In deep winter, a snow-blanketed 200 li of the capital region. Commoners rose early, each clearing the snow before their own doors, while children frolicked and played in groups. Suddenly, a chill wind blew, carrying the fragrance of plum blossoms from beyond the crimson walls of the imperial palace. Within the palace, the chiefing terrace was warm as spring, untouched by a single snowflake. Below the terrace, courtesans sang with melodious voices, their red sleeves fluttering. Yet none of the civil and military officials spared them a glance, each secretly vying for attention, their thoughts fixed on the woman on the high platform, veiled and clad in a golden phoenix court robe. This was none other than Empress Shi, a celestial being descended to the mortal world, graceful as a white crane emerging from the clouds, poised like a cold plum blossom, defiant against snow. Li Gungming, a secretary of the Ministry of Rites, stood before the assembled officials in his court robe and recited loudly. With a heart that pities heaven and earth, I plead for the people's longevity. A heavy snowfall falls, securing the realm for 1,000,000 years. Excellent. Secretary Li, worthy of your rank as the second-place scholar, your literary talent is remarkable. The left and right deputy ministers clapped and cheered, but their sidelong glances never left the figure on the high platform. Seeing Empress Shi show no reaction, they cleared their throats and stopped their applause. Li Gongming frowned slightly. Though unwilling, he could only step down in resignation. With such little skill, daring to show off is nothing but a disgrace. Han Qing snorted through his nose. Then under Li Gongming's furious glare, he rubbed his round belly and confidently stepped forward. I have a rhapsody written last night as inspired by a dream immortal. Today, I offer it to Empress Shi. His voice was loud, catching the ears of everyone, even piquing Empress Shi's curiosity. Fatty Han, keep bragging. I like to see what you can actually come up with. Li Gongming sneered, showing great disdain for Han Qing. Today, Empress Shi clearly has something on her mind and isn't in high spirits. Sycophantic flattery only works when her mood is good. When her mood is bad, the more she hears, the more annoyed she becomes. The bigger the show, the harder the fall. Every official in the Ministry of Revenue shook their heads and sighed. If it came to poetry and rhapsodies, the Ministry of Rites was second to none. Although Han Qing's literary talent was indeed good, that was at the time he passed the imperial exam. Everyone, listen to this rhapsody of mine. Han Qing turned back to glance at the assembled civil and military officials, especially those from the Ministry of Revenue. None had faith in him, but he was determined to be the one who brought them pride. Graceful as a startled swan, nimble as a swimming dragon. After the first line, Han Qing glanced up with his peripheral vision, deliberately checking Empress Shi's reaction. Seeing that she seemed interested, his confidence grew even stronger. Radiant as autumn chrysanthemums, flourishing as spring pines. Dimly she appears like a light cloud veiling the moon, fluttering like wind-driven snow. The moment his words fell, wah! The chiefing terrace erupted into an uproar. Many were dumbfounded, singing girls, dancers, and palace maids all wore expressions of envy, secretly thinking, could this poem really have been written after dreaming of a celestial being? Empress Shi's brows relaxed as she murmured to herself, graceful as a startled swan, nimble as a swimming dragon. After a few breaths, she smiled and said, "Thank you, Han Longzhou. But this poem is so stunning that I wonder if I am worthy of it. If Empress Shi is not worthy, then no woman in the world is." Overjoyed, Han Qing quickly added another flattering remark. Seeing that Han Qing had stolen the spotlight, the officials from the Ministry of Rites clenched their back teeth in envy, their eyes turning red. Li Gongming, furious and dizzy with rage, jumped out directly and pointed at Han Qing's nose, shouting, "Fatty Han, how dare you plagiarize this poem?" Han Qing was stunned for a moment, never expecting someone to be so bold at the Empress Dowager's birthday banquet. After snapping back to reality, he shot a fierce glare at Li Gongming and shouted loudly, "You're lying. I wrote this myself. Bah, a fat-headed, greasy-brained fool like you could never compose such a poem. Han Qing, how dare you? Stealing someone else's writing to present to the Empress Dowager. That's right, and you still refuse to admit it. The left and right vice ministers of the Ministry of Rites also jumped out, faces red and necks thick, pointing at Han Qing and cursing him out. In previous years, it was always their Ministry of Rites that made Empress Shi smile with joy. Why should this fat Han get the glory this year? I, Han Qing, am a presented scholar personally appointed by the Emperor, a disciple of the Son of Heaven himself. Why wouldn't I be able to compose such a poem? Saying I stole it if you're so capable. Try stealing one yourselves, and let me see. Han Qing's eyes bulged, his confidence strong enough to dampen the momentum of the Ministry of Rites officials. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Revenue officials were still in a daze, with Minister Li's mouth agape, his face filled with disbelief. With such literary talent, what was Han Qing doing wasting his time in the Ministry of Revenue? Interesting. Seeing the officials from a Ministry of Rites and Ministry of Revenue arguing, Empress Shi was not angry, but chuckled behind her hand. The eunuch who was about to throw out Han Qing and Li Gongming breathed a sigh of relief and stopped his action. A few days later, in the Punishment Department director's study, case files were piled high. A military clerk was reading aloud while Chun Yang, holding a brush, his handwriting somewhat messy, summarized these files into a booklet. Zhang Jiwu left, and a new right deputy director was appointed out of nowhere. It was said he was the grandson of some high-ranking official of the upper third rank here at the Punishment Department to gold-plate his resume. This task was originally Zhang Jiwu's once written. He would just glance it over. But now it fell on Chun Yang's head. In the capital region, if you throw a brick, 8 out of 10 people have connections. How many actually do real work? Chun Yang shook his head inwardly. Fortunately, that right deputy director would leave after a year. By then, he would promote his own right deputy director. This kind of resume padding happens everywhere. He didn't ask that person to work, only hoped he wouldn't jump around causing a mess and then leave without a care. Director Chun, Lord Han, you cannot. Director Chun dislikes being disturbed when organizing files. Do you know the purpose of my visit? Outside came the clamor of noise. By the time Chun Yang looked up, with a creak, Han Qing pushed open the door, rubbing his round belly, grinning widely, and cheerfully walked in. Director Chun, busy as always? Han Qing exchanged a pleasantry, pulled a chair over, and sat down opposite Chun Yang. Chun Yang's expression was blank. Whether he was busy or not, this fatty Han couldn't tell. Vice Minister Han, what brings you here? Chun Yang placed his brush on the brush rest and waved his hand, signaling the military clerk to leave first. The Ministry of Revenue had a habit. They disliked a third party listening in, even during casual chats. Vice Minister was a third-rank official of the 6 ministries. Last time Han Qing came, he had been a 5th-rank director. This time, when he came to the Punishment Evil office, he wore a crimson robe on the outside and a gold-embroidered undershirt, his face glowing with health, and he had deliberately put on a black hat with colored pheasant feathers, as if afraid others wouldn't know he had been promoted. Let me tell you a piece of good news, Director Chun. Han Qing grinned smugly and began to narrate how, at the foot of Chiefing Platform, his 3 lines of poetry had overwhelmed the civil and military officials, making them unable to lift their heads, leaving the Ministry of Rites officials furious and exasperated. If this rhapsody were completed, it would surely be remembered in history, its literary merit rivaling that of the greatest Confucian sages. It's a pity that Director Chun is not a Confucian cultivator. At least Poing Hen King sighed deeply. He had earned his Jinshi degree through genuine talent. If he had been more handsome, he would have been the 3rd-place scholar in that year's imperial examination. This rhapsody was not written by any predecessor. Looking forward 100 years, I doubt anyone could produce such a work. Just these 3 lines alone saved him at least 3 years of effort. Minister Han had come all the way to the Punishment Bureau just to say this. Chun Yang pursed his lips, a complex expression on his face. That the rhapsody of the Luo River Goddess would be remembered in history was something he didn't need Han Qing to tell him. Director Chun, don't be anxious. Han Qing shook his head and touched the ring on his finger. With a flash of light, a pile of items appeared in the study. Boxes of medicinal herbs, the 4 treasures of the study, dozens of scriptures, and several jade bottles. Chun Yang's brow relaxed. Although Han Qing was a bit long-winded, he was reliable in getting things done. He had delivered the items so quickly. Pills to dispel evil are not easy to buy. Don't underestimate these few bottles. I personally spent over 10,000 taels of silver on them. Han Qing's expression showed visible pain. 100,000? Let's drop the subject. Han Qing coughed dryly and quickly waved his hand to interrupt Qin Yang's words. Qin Yang should keep this to himself and must not speak of it carelessly, or even the prefect would have to step down. Director Chun, there's another matter I need to discuss with you. What is it? 4 days ago, a demonic cultivator named Gao Tianming was captured alive and will be sent to the punishment department tomorrow. Is it about Prefect Fang again? No, it's not. Han Qing shook his head like a rattle drum and continued. The demonic cultivator was captured alive by a young Confucian cultivator. When he entered the capital yesterday, he caused quite a stir. The case file must have been delivered this morning. Having said this, Han Qing did not elaborate further. Qin Yang had served as director for over a decade and knew the punishment department inside out. There was no need for Han Qing to explain more. Another young cultivator just starting out in the world. Qin Yang murmured to himself. He had seen the name Gao Tianming while organizing the files earlier, but hadn't looked into the details of the crime. However, this demonic cultivator had been placed in Class A. The punishment department had a fearsome reputation, but the only ones who didn't trust them were these young cultivators. They always wanted to watch the interrogation and questioning to see if the department was slacking off or if the information obtained was genuine. The punishment department had a reputation, but the only ones who didn't trust them were these younger cultivators. They always wanted to observe the interrogations together, to see if they were being handled hastily and whether the information obtained was true or false. The punishment department's interrogation of demonic practitioners cannot be witnessed without enduring harsh torment. Qin Yang remained expressionless, not even glancing at Han Qing. This Han fatty could freely enter and leave the punishment department because the Ministry of Revenue had a good relationship with the Demon Suppression Bureau, and also because Han Qing had no cultivation. Otherwise, how could outsiders come and go freely, let alone watch executions? Really not possible. Han Qing was somewhat unwilling to give up. That demonic cultivator abducted over 100 children, and I heard it even implicated a county magistrate. Han Qing spoke in a low voice, furtively looking around, then took out a Qilin paperweight from his storage ring, carved from white jade, as fine and pure as mutton fat, without a single impurity. Supervisor Chun, even if you cannot let that Confucian scholar watch the execution, could you at least sit and have a brief chat with him afterward? Upon hearing about the abduction of hundreds of children, Qin Yang understood why the Confucian scholar was so insistent on watching the execution. After hesitating for a few breaths, he finally nodded. The rules of the punishment department cannot be broken. When I start the torture, have that scholar wait at the punishment department. As for this paperweight, Minister Han, take it back. Just a small trinket, Supervisor Chun. Keep it to play with. Han Qing grinned, forcibly stuffed the Qilin paperweight back, and then, afraid Qin Yang would change his mind, left without looking back. It seemed this fatty Han wanted to build a friendship. Qin Yang picked up the jade Qilin and casually played with it. Such a small paperweight was probably worth what an ordinary family could earn through hard work in a lifetime. He didn't believe that the Confucian scholar had given it. It must be that Han Qing, acting as a mediator, had paid for it out of his own pocket. Qin Yang couldn't help but be curious about who that young Confucian scholar was, that he made a third-rank vice minister curry favors so obsequiously. So he found Gao Tianming's file and read it carefully. Gao Tianming was suspected of being involved with the Evil Wind Shadow sect. He was the second-place scholar in the Wushu Imperial Examination and was captured by Li Buyu of Azure Sky Academy. Li Buyu. Qin Yang's pupils slightly dilated, and a trace of emotion appeared on his face. This name was too familiar to him. 12 years ago, the fellow villager who passed the Imperial Examination for Shiotsi together with him was named Li Buyu. He just didn't know if it was a coincidence in name, or if that fellow villager had smoothly become a top scholar and entered Azure Sky Academy to cultivate Confucianism. If Buyu were still alive, he would surely pass the Jinshu exam, and with some luck, he might even achieve the first-rank Jinshu. Qin Yang murmured to himself, his heart filled with longing and a tumult of thoughts that left him unable to calm down for a long time. After a quarter of an hour, he called in the marshal clerk from outside the study to continue organizing the files. The next day, Qin Yang led 2 new executioners into cell number 8 of Section A. The demonic cultivator bound on the torture platform was ugly, with slanted eyes and a scar like a centipede on his face. His left arm was severed at the shoulder. When he saw Chun Yang and the two others enter, he opened his eyes wide, his expression filled with terror. "Where is this? Who are you?" Chun Yang raised an eyebrow and glanced sideways at Gao Tianming. Not expecting that this demonic cultivator still didn't know he had entered the Punishment Evil Department. This place is called the Punishment Evil Department, cell number 8 of Section A. Chun Yang picked up 2 torture instruments, a silver needle covered in spikes and a small knife with a serrated blade. "I am Chun Yang, the director of the Punishment Evil Department." Punishment Evil Department? Gao Tianming's pupils dilated, his face turning deathly pale, drained of all color. "Director Chun, have you forgotten to copy the scriptures?" One of them hesitated for a moment and whispered a sentence. He didn't know if those veteran torturers copied scriptures before administering punishment, but he had heard that Chun Yang always copied scriptures before punishment, never missing a single time in 11 years. Torturing such a demonic Taoist. Why bother copying scriptures, wasting time? Chun Yang's expression was indifferent, his voice as cold as the wind in the 12th lunar month. The temperature in the prison suddenly dropped several degrees, and the 2 new torturers couldn't help but shiver. 2 hours later, the prison was completely silent. As soon as Chun Yang exited the Jiazi section, he saw Han Qing, who had been waiting for a long time. "Director Chun, you're finally out." Han Qing clicked his tongue and pulled Chun Yang along as he walked. Over an hour ago, he had led that Confucian scholar to the punishment department. If not for being forbidden to go deeper, he would have wanted to wait right outside the prison cell. At 13, a child scholar at 16, a licentiate, then he achieved the Jiuan and Huiyuan, almost making a clean sweep of the top honors in the 3 examinations. He was a scholar from Qingtian Academy, apprenticed to a great Confucian scholar. On the way, Han Qing elaborated on the scholar's background. Chun Yang only caught the part about child scholar at 13, licentiate at 16. That fellow townsman happened to be the same age as him, which stirred ripples in his eyes. Upon entering the hall, Chun Yang saw a man in white robes with a refined demeanor sitting and sipping tea, a brush hanging at his waist, and a book held in his hand as he read intently. "Li Ruxing, Director Chun has arrived." Han Qing clasped his hands, his expression unusually serious. Li Buyu paused, closed the book, and looked up. When he saw Chun Yang's white hair, dry and withered like weeds, pale complexion, and clouded pupils, he couldn't help but freeze for a few breaths. "I am Chun Yang." Chun Yang clasped his hands, taking the lead to break the silence. "I am Li Buyu. Director Chun, please have a seat." Li Buyu stood and clasped his hands. After Chun Yang sat down, he poured him a cup of tea. "I meant no offense just now. It's just that Director Chun resembles an old acquaintance of mine." Li the scholar has an old acquaintance serving hard labor? Chun Yang took a light sip of tea, his gaze rippling like the tea's surface. "I'm not sure yet." Li Buyu shook his head and glanced at Han Qing. The latter knew it was time to leave, so he offered a farewell and rose to go. "Director Chun, is interrogating demonic cultivators with torture difficult? For a mortal body to interrogate demons and monsters, just saying difficult doesn't cover it. That being said, may I ask how you, Minister Chun, managed to get through it?" "It was quite a long time ago. I can't recall clearly." The 2 chatted idly, mostly Li Buyu asking and Chun Yang answering. I don't know how long they had talked. Li Buyu picked up the teapot to refill his cup, but found it empty. Seeing that it was getting late, he stood up and said, "I have caused you much trouble today. If you, Minister Chun, ever come to Qingtian Academy, I will surely treat you with the respect due a gentleman. Scholarly, your eagerness to vanquish demons is clear. How could it be considered trouble? Farewell, farewell." The 2 clasped their hands in farewell. When Li Buyu reached the door, he paused slightly, turned back, and said, "This jade is imbued with righteous aura and has the power to ward off evil." As he spoke, Li Buyu untied the jade pendant from his waist and gently flicked it. The pendant, like a leaf in the wind, drifted lightly onto the table in front of Chun Yang. "Many thanks." Chun Yang put away the jade pendant, his expression unchanged, but ripples stirred deep in his eyes. "Brother Chun, why thank me?" Li Buyu smiled and turned to leave, leaving Chun Yang standing there, slightly stunned. After a long silence, the corners of Chun Yang's mouth lifted slightly. "That's good then. Since escaping Chong'an County, I never went back to look. I thought only I had survived among those I knew well. I never imagined there would still be an old acquaintance alive in this world. And in the blink of an eye, that old acquaintance became a scholar whom even fourth-rank officials in the capital had to curry favor with. Director Chun, what were you two discussing just now? Before long, Han Qing sent Li Buyu off and returned to find Qin Yang, a puzzled look in his eyes. Nothing more than the matter of interrogating demons and monsters. The torture techniques of the punishment department are indeed impressive. Han Qing nodded and plopped himself down onto a chair. As director of the department, Chun Yang's interrogation skills were famously outstanding. Although Han Qing had never studied such techniques himself, after visiting the punishment department many times, he had developed his own insights. Director Chun, in my view, interrogating demons and monsters is also an interrogation of one's own mindset. In the end, it all comes down to faith. Am I right or not? Han Qing shook his head and rambled on of his own accord. Chun Yang smiled without a word, knowing that this fatty Han had another flaw: he loved to lecture. Or rather, once an official gets to a high enough rank, 5th grade and above, it's hard not to develop a fondness for lecturing. And so, a month passed in the blink of an eye. Since last time, Han Qing had not come to the punishment department for some days. However, on this day, a great figure named Qi Chunlin arrived at the punishment department. This person hailed from the Qingtian Academy, a renowned great scholar of the age, famous far and wide. His age was unknown. He wore a white robe, with white hair, a youthful face, white eyebrows, and a long beard. Just looking at him gave one a sense of righteous awe. After Qi Chunlin entered the punishment department, he personally recited scriptures for the condemned prisoners to pray for blessings, and left a piece of calligraphy in the punishment department. Student Qin Yang pays respects to Master Qi. Qin Yang clasped his hands in greeting. Before the great scholar of Qingtian Academy left, he personally went to meet him. Qi Chunlin lowered his eyelids, clasped his hands behind his back, and looked at Qin Yang, his pupils flickering. After a few moments of silence, he let out a long sigh and said, 12 years wasted, what a pity. 12 years ago, he was traveling and happened to meet Qin Yang and Li Buyu. The three sat together and talked all night, enjoying a delightful conversation. The two young men were full of vigor, aiming to become top Jinshi, cultivating the Confucian path to achieve the fame of great scholars. This made him think of his younger self, and he felt the desire to promote the younger generation. He said that if the two passed the imperial examinations, they could go to Qingtian Academy to find him, and if they truly achieved first-class Jinshi, he would accept them as his direct disciples. Years later, a young man named Li Buyu came to Qingtian Academy. But of the two, Qin Yang, whom he was most pleased with, did not come. 12 years later, the two met again. That spirited young man had become numb, like an old man on the verge of death. If you hadn't joined the punishment department and instead took the imperial exams to gain fame and then entered Qingtian Academy, your achievements will be no less than Buyu's. Qin Yang was silent for a moment, then shook his head and said, Student shares a deep blood feud with that demonic Taoist. Entering the punishment department to punish countless demons, this path also has its gains. Qi Chunlin's white brows furrowed slightly. Seeing Qin Yang as silent as a gourd, his eyes showed even more displeasure. Angrily, he flicked his sleeves and left. Stubborn and unrepentant, Qin Yang pursed his lips. After a few breaths, he looked up and saw Qi Chunlin standing 10 feet away. With a wave of his left hand, a white beam flew into Qin Yang's hand. It was a book bound with golden threads. The ink seemed freshly written just a few days ago. This book, 7 Instructions of a Gentleman, you must have studied it as well. Diligently copy it, and it can keep you safe for 3 years. Qin Yang, you must act wisely and not lead yourself astray. With that, a gentle breeze suddenly stirred in the still, windless punishment evil department. When Qin Yang looked again, Qi Chunlin's figure had vanished. Is this path the wrong one? Qin Yang murmured to himself, clutching the bagua furnace pendant hanging around his neck, his gaze lost and uncertain. Back then, he had also considered passing the imperial exams and seeking out Qi Chunlin at Qingtian Academy. But after much hesitation, he chose to join the punishment evil department instead, where he remained for 12 years. When Li Buyu arrived, he felt a twinge of envy. If he hadn't entered the punishment evil department, he might have become a scholar as well. Qi Chunlin's arrival unsettled his Tao heart even further, plunging him into deep doubt. Had he taken a wrong path? No, even if this path leads nowhere, the moment he set foot on it, there was no turning back. After a few breaths, Qinyang took a deep breath, his eyes gradually hardening. Starting tomorrow, he would punish 3 demonic cultivators each day. The next spring, 3 great Confucian scholars from Qingtian Academy emerged, leading the martial department of the Demon Suppressing Bureau in service to the sovereign. They swept through 800 li of demonic cultivators, killing until rivers ran red, and captured hundreds alive, nearly overflowing the cells of the Punishment Evil Department. Prison Cell A1. 3 new torturers were sharpening their tools as Chun Yang, brush in hand, copied the 7 instructions of the gentleman. Upon completion, he looked up at the demonic Taoist on the torture rack. Jia is the first of the 10 heavenly stems, and 1 also signifies the first. This was the second time since he joined the Punishment Bureau that a demonic Taoist had been thrown into Prison Cell A1. The demonic Taoist on the torture rack was named Jiang Huaizi. Just by appearance, he looked exceptionally kind and benevolent, with gentle eyes and brows, like an old scholar who had taught his whole life. Young man, I may not be able to withstand your torture techniques, but that great Confucian scripture will not protect you. Jiang Huaizi's expression was calm, unlike previous demonic Taoists who were terrified upon hearing Chun Yang's name, to the point of trembling. The implication was that if Chun Yang used severe methods, both would die. I have tortured thousands of demonic Taoists. Chun Yang, expressionless, picked up the sharpened torture instrument and slowly walked towards the old man. Haha, I never expected that a small punishment bureau would have a young man like you. Jiang Huaizi let out a few loud laughs, watching the execution knife get closer and closer to his face until beads of sweat finally appeared on his forehead. It seems you are not as fearless as I imagined. Chun Yang curled his lips, first peeling off Jiang Huaizi's skin bit by bit with the execution knife, then driving silver needles covered in spikes in his 10 fingers, torturing him until his mind collapsed and he screamed without end. An hour later, Jiang Huaizi was dazed and listless. The 3 new torturers began copying the case files, but halfway through, Chun Yang ordered them to stop. This is somewhat unexpected. Chun Yang shook his head and picked up the torture instruments again. Jiang Huaizi suddenly snapped back to reality, glaring fiercely at Chun Yang and hoarsely shouting, "When I die, you won't live either." Chen Yang bite no head. The torture instruments in the cell were used one after another. An hour later, he allowed the 3 torturers to resume copying the files. The mouth of an upper 3rd rank demon cultivator is indeed tough. Chen Yang murmured to himself. This was a big catch, but what did upper 3rd rank matter? In all his years in the punishment division, he had only been fooled once and never failed since. With one strike, the sword pierced Jiang Huaizi's heart, extinguishing his last thread of life. A thick wisp of white vapor rose and fell into the 8 trigram furnace. The soul-locking needle fell. Jiang Huaizi's corpse burst into flames. In the sealed prison room, gusts of eerie wind howled, piercingly cold, cutting like knives against the face. An aura of death spread. The 3 new tormentors trembled in fear. Their eyes darkened, and they fainted. I want you dead. Suddenly a hoarse roar erupted. From a void, a wisp of black chi shot into Chun Yang's brow. With a buzz, a corner of the 8 trigram furnace lifted, transforming into a plume of flame that merged into Chun Yang's body. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. Chun Yang's eyes were vacant, as if he were unaware of everything happening in the prison. Rumble, rumble. In the pitch-black void of his sea of consciousness, thunder and fire raged together, as if heaven and earth were being recreated, the momentum terrifying and overwhelming. After an unknown time, the thunder and fire gradually subsided, and an 8 trigram furnace emerged from nothing. The furnace lid lifted, golden light burst out and condensed into the heavenly white jade capital in the sky, with clouds piled layer upon layer. On top were scattered celestial figures, each towering tens of thousands of feet, exuding an indescribable sense of oppression. One stood atop a divine turtle, hair loose, wielding a sword, holding a divine spear, with a dog lying at his feet, red silk wrapped around him, magical treasures protecting his body, and golden armor and an iron rod, all majestic and awe-inspiring. At the top of the white jade capital, there was an elder holding a duster, riding a green ox, followed by two child attendants. This Jiang Huaizi fell into Chun Yang's sea of consciousness, his pupils dilating. A trace of oppressive force descended. Jiang Huaizi's expression was terrified. His remnant soul shattered and fell into the 8-trigram furnace. 12 years, and it was finally accomplished. The next moment, a soft sigh was heard. Chun Yang's figure appeared beneath the white jade capital. After cupping his hands in a bow, he knelt and performed the 3 kowtows and 9 prostrations. When he looked up again, the white jade capital gradually dissipated. The elder riding the green ox reached down a hand and brushed it over Chun Yang's head. Chun Yang opened his eyes, and his sight was now in the prison. The 3 new convicts had not yet woken up. The 8-trigram furnace on his chest had disappeared, leaving only a red string. Defeating the demon grants 9 breath chi absorption. 9 breath chi absorption is the supreme method of breath control. Inhaling and exhaling for 9 breaths. It absorbs the primal energy of heaven and earth and transforms internal force. Gathering the chi of heaven and earth can heal injuries and fully restore one's condition. The corners of Chun Yang's mouth lifted, his expression showing uncontrollable excitement. 9 breath chi absorption, this is one of the 36 heavenly techniques, a genuine great divine power. 12 years had passed. Looking back, he had figured it all out. It wasn't that the person had deliberately made things difficult for him. The 2 demonic cultivators who slaughtered Chong'an County were no ordinary foes. To save him, the 8-trigram furnace had exhausted its power. After 12 years of torturing and interrogating the demonic cultivators, the furnace was finally reawakened. As he had guessed, this 8-trigram furnace truly belonged to that person, but it wasn't just that slaying demons and monsters granted divine techniques. The old Taoist was right. It was indeed an enormous opportunity. It was truly perilous. Chun Yang glanced at the execution platform and couldn't help shaking his head. Having served as the warden for so many years, among the demon cultivators sent to the punishment department, this Jiang Huaizi had the highest cultivation. If not for the timely awakening of the 8-trigrams furnace, he would have fallen into the trap this time. Jiang Huaizi was a second-ranked demon cultivator, cunning and vicious. Capturing such a demon cultivator alive was several times harder than killing him. I wonder, it was Lord Feng of the Martial Department of the Demon Suppression Bureau who personally took action to subdue him. Yesterday, the person who delivered the dossier was a colonel from the Martial Department, who repeatedly instructed him to torture every word out of Jiang Huaizi. Speaking of Jiang Huaizi, he had been in seclusion for years, but suddenly appeared a month ago, traveling through 13 prefectures in the southern wasteland, using water rituals to sacrifice over 1,000 people. But no matter how he tortured and interrogated him, he could not extract the secrets behind it. It wasn't that Jiang Huaizi's mouth was truly that tough, but rather that Jiang Huaizi himself didn't know why he had to use water rituals to sacrifice 1,000 people. He only said that someone came to him and offered a condition he couldn't refuse. Jiang Huaizi did not know that person's identity, but it was definitely not a demon or monster. Not a demon or monster, nor any prestigious sect. No power could bear the consequences of this. In that case, there's only enough. I must not dwell on this. Cultivation is the priority. Another half-month passed in a blink. Cell 9, Section A. The 3 executioners frowned, each gripping their instruments tightly, their eyes fixed nervously on the demonic cultivator on the torture platform as they murmured in low voices about how to begin the punishment. After a long while, the first cut was finally made. Rustling sounds. Chun Yang sat at the table, flipping through a cultivation manual. Before long, he closed it and set it aside, then picked up another from beside him. This time, he spent even less time reading barely the length of a cup of tea before putting it down. He had read at least a dozen cultivation manuals and finally reached a conclusion. The real stuff was never written in books. He learned nothing, only the division of realms. Immortal cultivation, with 3,000 paths, is divided into 9 realms. From a 9th realm down to the 7th is the lower 3 grades, called the body-tempering realm. From the 6th to the 4th is the middle 3 grades, the body-transforming realm. From the 3rd realm upwards are the upper 3 grades, also known as the three Marvel realms. Those who enter these realms are what mortals call immortal masters beyond that are the immortals. With just the 9-breath chi absorption method, there was hope for the immortal path. There was no need to learn these manuals. Chun Yang stretched, and his bones crackled, like popping firecrackers. Over the past half-month, he had already gained initial mastery of the 9-breath chi absorption method. With each breath, the magical power circulated throughout his body, flowing through his limbs and bones, converging in his dantian. His white hair, dry as grass, regained luster. His spirit improved considerably, no longer listless. You're asking for death. You're asking for death. The demon cultivator on the execution platform roared endlessly. The 3 executioners were sweating profusely on their foreheads, looking completely at a loss. Leave the rest to me. You all watch carefully. Chen Yang stood up. With a subtle flick of his finger in his sleeve, the execution knife on the table silently appeared in his hand. Having 3 executioners who had been in the bureau for less than half a month interrogate the demon cultivator from section, it was indeed too much for them. Yes, Magistrate Chun. The 3 breathed a sigh of relief and retreated behind Chen Yang. 3 hours later, with a poochie sound, 1 strike and the demon cultivator died. A wisp of white vapor, visible only to him, entered his sea of consciousness. By vanquishing the demon, he obtained Sleeve Universe. The sleeve contains the universe. The pot holds the sun and moon with just 1 sleeve. One can encompass all things in heaven and earth. To seek the wonders of the Tao, look to the art of Qianquan. Chen Yang raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth involuntarily curling up. Ever since he acquired the 9 breaths of chi absorption, he thought he could casually torture demons and monsters to obtain the 108 arts of heaven and earth. Who would have thought that for half a month, it only gave him minor spells, until finally it bestowed a divine skill. But the Sleeve Universe seemed to be Zhang Yuanzi's exclusive technique. His signature move: could the old lord be riding an ox to eat ginseng fruits? Once you finish cleaning this cell, you may return to rest. Chen Yang put down the torture knife, flicked his sleeve, and walked to the next cell. The Great Xia dynasty had been unsettled lately after interrogating this Jia division cell. There were still 3 demon cultivators left. Chief, something terrible has happened. Just as he stepped out of the cell, he heard an anxious voice. Chen Yang turned his head and saw 2 young constables running over, drenched in sweat. What is the matter that you are so flustered? Wang Qixing from cell number 2 of the E division is dead. Dead? Chen Yang frowned slightly and immediately headed toward Wang Qixing's cell. He appeared unhurried, but each step covered the distance of several. The 2 constables jogged but could not catch up. After half an hour, with a whoosh, the cell door opened and Chen Yang stepped inside alone. The demonic Taoist on the execution platform was a woman, completely naked, skin white as snow. With each breath, her chest heaved, her face enchanting, cheeks flushed, and her eyes incredibly seductive. A man lay on top of the woman. The man was naked from the waist down, his eyes wide open as if about to pop out of their sockets, with no breath left. This way of dying is called wind atop the horse for men and wind beneath the crotch for women. Chen Yang, a torturer of the punishment department, recognized the man as Wang Qixing. It seemed that after gambling away his family fortune and nearly being killed by debtors, he had come to the punishment department. Counting the time, he had been in the punishment department for 8 months. Sir, push this dead man away, and I will let you do as you wish with me. The woman's lips breathed a faint orchid scent, her voice melting into the bones. Chen Yang, expressionless, looked down and saw another man lying on the execution platform. This was a fellow torturer named Wang Dehu, who had been on the same platform as Wang Qixing. He lay on the ground unconscious, the back of his head covered in blood, apparently knocked out by a blow from Wang Qixing's club. What a demonic Taoist! Chen Yang let out a strange laugh, flexing his right finger as a wisp of spiritual light shot out, landing on Wang Qixing and freeing him 10 feet away. Who are you? The woman's pupils constricted, and she shrieked, all traces of coquettishness gone from her face. Chen Yang, chief of the punishment evil department. As he spoke, Chen Yang flicked his finger again, sending a burst of magical power into the woman's body, draining the cultivation essence she had plundered. How do you possess mid-level third-rank Taoist cultivation. The woman's expression twisted with despair creeping into her eyes. "It's useless to tell you." Chen Yang, expressionless, picked up the execution blade from the ground to torture the demonic cultivator. Meanwhile, Wang Dao woke up and, seeing Wang Qixing's corpse, collapsed to the ground in tears. The two were from the same village and had agreed to venture out together, but upon entering the capital's jurisdiction, they had lost their travel permits. With no relatives or friends in the capital, they were forced to join the punishment evil department. 2 hours later, the dossier was written. Chen Yang picked up the execution blade and casually threw it, striking the demonic cultivator between the eyebrows. Upon exorcising the demon, he obtained the Wenchang Emperor's precepts on quelling lust. Wenchang Emperor, also known as the Wenchang Star, provides this precepts on quelling lust to break the barrier of lustful demons. This scripture comes at just the right time. Chen Yang went to the long table in the prison cell, took out a sheet of rice paper, ground ink, and dipped his brush. While softly chanting, he wrote, "In the vast sea of sin, the chief evil is nothing but lust in the troubled mortal world. The easiest to transgress is lewdness. Even a hero who can uproot mountains and surpass the world, through this, loses his life and disgraces his country." This scripture was not long, but with every stroke, Chen Yang found it extremely difficult. After just a few dozen characters, the tip of his nose was slightly sweating. Unconsciously, vast magical power surged from his dantian, coalescing into a stream. Thus, once the chief evil is removed, all the other evils naturally disappear. The mind becomes unobstructed, and the world's blessings bestow glory. Chen Yang stopped his brush and let out a long breath of white air. He had spent a full quarter of an hour writing the scripture and was half soaked in sweat. Take this scripture to the right deputy director. At tomorrow's morning roll call, have every cruel guard memorize it. Henceforth, before interrogating demon cultivators, each must copy it once. Chen Yang walked out of the prison cell and handed the scripture to a marshal clerk waiting outside. He then had another marshal clerk carry away Wang Qixing's corpse to burn it, and also wake up Wang Dao on the way. Deaths among the cruel guards were common. 5 had died this month, and 14 new cruel guards have been recruited. The lives of ordinary people are cheap, and the lives of those in hard labor are even more worthless. I can't concern myself with so much cultivation is what matters. Chen Yang shook his head, recalling the earlier events. The lower 3 tiers cultivate external refinement, only the middle 3 tiers can cultivate magical power. The 9-breath qi absorption method doesn't concern itself with external or internal refinement. That demonic Taoist from the E-character section thus mistook him for a middle 3-tier cultivator. When copying the Wenchang Emperor's precious instructions on avoiding lust, he discovered that his cultivation seemed to increase. After leaving the cell, he realized that copying that scripture once was as effective as 3 months of his own practice. It was already late. The remaining 2 demonic Taoists of the Jia character section would be interrogated tomorrow. Chen Yang rushed back to the study without stopping, ground ink, soaked his brush, and copied the scripture once more. This time it also had an effect, but only increased a month's worth of cultivation. Perhaps because he copied too frequently. The next day, before roll call and interrogating the demonic Taoists, he copied the Wenchang Emperor's precious instructions on avoiding lust once more. Chen Yang looked inward at his dantian and saw that his cultivation had increased by 2 months. He had guessed it correctly. Chen Yang's lips curled up in a very good mood. He glanced at the demonic Taoist on the torture platform, whose face was full of terror, and leisurely picked up the torture instrument. After copying the scriptures, he interrogated the demonic cultivator. 3 hours later, defeating the demon, he obtained the sword drawing technique. Since he was given the sword technique, it would be unreasonable not to also give a sword. Chen Yang's eyes flickered, and he went to interrogate another demonic cultivator from the Jia character category. Defeating the demon, he obtained a piece of embroidered red belly band. Chen Yang pursed his lips, waved his sleeve, and stored the belly band into his sleeve universe. The items given from slaying demons really weren't what he expected. Fortunately, although the punishment department was poor with no perks to be had, lacking everything, the one thing it did not lack was demonic cultivators. Starting tomorrow, Chen Yang would interrogate 4 demonic cultivators a day. The torturers and martial officers of the punishment department were all shocked, thinking to themselves, is Chun Yang addicted to torture, or does he truly hold such great hatred for demonic cultivators? Is he really not afraid of dropping dead? Disguise technique, bathing technique. One transformation spirit pill, one big banana. The Taishang Gaining Pian. The items obtained from interrogating demonic cultivators were truly diverse. Others knew nothing about the Bagua furnace. Qin Yang wished he could grow 2 more hands, so he could interrogate 10 or 8 demonic cultivators a day. Time flew by, and it was winter again a year later. The right deputy director, who came to the punishment and evil department to gild his resume, left, and the next day, Qin Yang promoted a new right deputy director. Over the past year, the Great Xia had become increasingly unsettled. The number of demons and Taoists thrown into the punishment and evil department had nearly doubled. It really wouldn't do to be short of people to do the work. 10 days ago, a major incident occurred in the capital region. A great Confucian scholar hanged himself at the foot of the city wall. How many great Confucian scholars were there in the entire Great Xia? Within just a quarter of an hour, the matter spread throughout the capital region. By the next day, even the martial officers of the punishment and evil department were discussing it. On the 3rd day, several officials had their tongues cut out and were thrown into the punishment and evil department. No interrogation for any crime was needed. They were simply subjected to all kinds of torture until death. Even the Ministry of Justice stepping in wouldn't satisfy the hatred. They had to be sent to the punishment and evil department. For a moment, Qin Yang was somewhat curious about why that great Confucian scholar had hanged himself and what crimes those several officials had committed to be thrown into the punishment and evil department. That day, at the hour of Wei 1, 3 p.m., another batch of new cruel laborers arrived, more than 20 of them. Qin Yang looked around and was surprised to find a familiar face. Most of these new cruel laborers were sallow and emaciated. Only one person, as fat as a ball, could barely fit into the largest-sized prison uniform, and his belly would pop out at the slightest movement. Han Sherlang, long time no see. Han Qing turned sideways, covering his face to avoid being seen by Qin Yang, but since his name was called, he had to turn back, force a smile, and cupped his hands in greeting. Qin Xijing. Qin Yang looked at Han Qing with curiosity, sizing him up from head to toe. At the Empress's birthday banquet last year, Han Qing made a huge splash with 3 lines of poetry, and his reputation kept growing. Even when he, Qin Yang, was sitting in the punishment department, he could hear of Han Qing's great name. What? The #1 scholar of the capital. The true top scholar, Han Sherlang. The leading master of poetry in the Great Xia dynasty. The dream lover of countless talented women. Half a year ago, Han Qing wrote him a letter saying that the high officials and wealthy merchants in the capital had almost worn down the threshold of his mansion from visiting. The great scholars of the Howard Academy even sent 2 Confucian scholars to personally invite him to the academy for a chat. He said that after finishing his business at the end of winter this year, he would bring some treasures and come visit him at the punishment department. At year's end, Han Qing did indeed come to the punishment department, but he didn't bring any treasures. The once refined scholar of the Jade Hall had somehow become a harsh warden in the punishment department. Was Minister Han demoted due to lifestyle issues or mistakes? I sided with the wrong faction. Han Qing coughed dryly, his expression awkward as he walked up to Qin Yang and whispered, "Director Chun, please look after me in the future." Qin Yang raised an eyebrow, a faint, knowing smile on his face as he patted Han Qing on the shoulder and said, "There's nothing wrong with being a harsh warden. You just spend all day interrogating demons and Taoists. Minister Han, why not use your attitude and beliefs to interrogate those demons and Taoists?" Director Chun, considering we've known each other, don't be so heartless. Han Qing pulled a long face, almost grabbing Qin Yang's leg. It was one thing to say it, but another to actually do it. Interrogating demons and Taoists every day would be the death of him. Qin Yang chuckled softly, no longer teasing Han Qing. Too many officials have sided with the wrong faction, but who knows when Han Qing might get out of here. Minister Han, just tell me one thing. How did that great Confucian scholar die? Qin Yang parted his lips slightly and spoke in a voice only the 2 of them could hear. Han Qing shuddered, his chubby face trembling, and his expression turned flustered. You can't just say things like that. A few words won't hurt, they won't leave the punishment office. Han Qing hesitated for a few breaths, then gritted his teeth and whispered. That person climbed over the red wall and cursed for quite a while. Because of the matter of the 13 prefectures in the southern border of Great Xia. How do you know about this? Han Qing's pupils widened, and he couldn't help but exclaim, then realizing what he'd done, quickly covered his mouth. It's better for you, Director Chun, to know as little as possible about this kind of thing. Han Qing looked panicked. How many people have died because of this matter? Qinyang was really bold. Even the officials in the capital wouldn't dare discuss this privately, afraid of getting involved. But Qinyang took the initiative to ask about it. No worries. Who would pay attention to a lowly director like me? Qinyang looked unconcerned to outsiders. He, the director of the punishment office, was just a mortal with little time left. Han Qing was demoted to a cruel guard. Out of consideration for past friendship, Qinyang arranged a separate room and a new set of bedding for him. For the first month, he followed Qinyang to learn torture techniques. Even so, Han Qing wore a bitter face all day, constantly muttering in Qinyang's ear that if he had known he would end up as a cruel guard, he should have gone to Minister Li when he was working in the Ministry of Revenue to ask for more silver to be allocated to the punishment department. The people in the Ministry of Revenue were all shrewd. The implication was that Qinyang should give him some special treatment. Qinyang had eaten enough empty promises in his previous life and didn't want any more in this one, so he simply pretended not to understand. In the second month, Han Qing began interrogating demon cultivators and lost dozens of pounds in a month, complaining to Qinyang every day. 2 months later, the 3-stripe purity pill that Han Qing had given to Qinyang earlier, which Qinyang had never taken, eventually found its way back into Han Qing's mouth. 6 months passed in the blink of an eye, and Han Qing seemed to have been forgotten in the punishment department. Suddenly one day, someone from the imperial court came to summon Han Qing back to resume his official post. Finally, I'm leaving this godforsaken place. Upon hearing the news, Han Qing couldn't stop laughing, but then he sat down on the ground, grabbing Qinyang's clothes, crying with tears and snot. Next time, don't side with the wrong faction. Qinyang bent down, patted Han Qing on the shoulder, and comforted him. In these 6 months, Han Qing hadn't gained nothing when he first entered the punishment department. He weighed at least 400 jin, but now he's at most 120 jin. Chief Chen, why don't you leave the punishment department? Han Qing stopped crying, looked up at Qinyang. During his 6 months as a brutal laborer, he had wanted to stab himself to death many times. As for Qinyang, he had stayed in the punishment department for over 10 years, still cheerful before each demon execution, and after killing several demonic Taoists, he would even laugh out loud. Great Confucians hold the pen to govern the world. True lords wield swords to slay demons. A small fry like me, staying in the punishment department, also counts as vanquishing demons and evil. Qinyang waved his sleeve and pointed to the gate of the punishment department leading to the outside. Dr. Han, you go on ahead. Today I have 3 demonic Taoists to interrogate. Han Qing took a deep look at Qinyang, as if lost in thought. After leaving the punishment department, he took a deep breath of the air on the ground and came to a conclusion. He must have gone mad. Qinyang has tortured too many demonic cultivators, ruined his own mind, and wasted his best years. Not to mention anything else, just his literary talent. Those 3 lines of poetry were truly exquisite. If he were to take the imperial exams, he would surely overwhelm all the other candidates and make them hang their heads in shame. Prison number 7, Category A. In just 1 hour, the demonic cultivator was on the verge of death, and the case file was completed. In recent months, aside from Han Qing, Qinyang no longer brought new cruel torturers into the department. Disciple Qinyang begs the Supreme Elder to bestow 1/9 Revolution Golden Pill. After copying the sutras, Qinyang waved his sleeve, set up an incense burner, lit 3 sticks of incense, and bowed with clasped hands to a painting hanging on the wall. When the 3 incense sticks burned out, Qinyang picked up the torture knife and stabbed it into the demonic cultivator's heart. After a few moments of silence, Qinyang's brows furrowed slightly. This was the first time nothing was given. In the past, though the things given were bizarre, like Spring Breeze One Day Man or Dissolute Love Pill, at least something was given. Could it be that the painting is not accurate? Qinyang muttered to himself as he glanced at the portrait on the wall. He had been skilled in painting since childhood, And it was precisely this skill that had caught the attention of the great scholar Qi Chunlin, who had looked at him with newfound respect. In the painting, the green ox was lifelike, the old man had an immortal's demeanor, and the two children were vividly portrayed. Whatever the white jade capital looked like, the painting captured it exactly. Thinking more carefully, just now when he had slain the demonic cultivator, it seemed as if a surge of magical power had entered his dantian. Thinking of this, Chun Yang sat cross-legged in meditation, looked inward at his dantian, and after a few breaths, realized that the problem wasn't with the painting. Killing the demonic cultivator and refining that wisp of white energy in the 8 trigrams furnace had increased his cultivation by 10 months. Giving some cultivation progress is fine too. Chun Yang waved his sleeve, putting away the incense burner and the scroll from the wall. It seemed that Lord Laozi was destined not to give him the 9-turn golden elixir. But at least, besides copying scriptures, he now had another way to increase his cultivation. He had been worried that his cultivation progressed too slowly after all this time. He only had 800 years of cultivation. A few months ago, after executing a demonic cultivator, he had obtained a spell called the Concealment Art, which could hide one's aura. Without this spell, it would have been difficult to conceal these 800 years of cultivation, even in the punishment of evil department. The day after Han Qing left, another batch of hard labor prisoners arrived at the punishment department, mostly civil officials from the Ministry of Rights, the lowest ranking at 6th grade, and even a full 2nd grade senior official. These officials looked embarrassed. Upon seeing Chun Yang, they quickly recited over 10 names, but Chun Yang didn't recognize a single one. These scholar officials, each holding themselves in high regard, prattled on all day about the way and virtue, mouthfuls of benevolence and righteousness, looking down on everyone. If things went poorly, they'd spout sermons. If tasks failed, it was always due to lack of effort. Once they were made hard laborers, they quickly quieted down. By the 3rd month, the 2nd grade official bit his tongue and killed himself. The rest of the officials, utterly despairing, one by one followed suit. These people were not even as good as Han Qing. Chun Yang silently shook his head. He had some acquaintance with Han Qing, but with these officials, no such bond existed. He handled matters impartially, ignoring any pleas for leniency. As Great Xia was in turmoil and demons ran rampant, from a certain day onward, demonic cultivators sent to the punishment department were all of higher cultivation. This batch of officials soon died off completely. But in the past half year, officials from the court were being sent to the punishment department from time to time. Chun Yang inquired and learned that since Han Qing set a precedent, all the officials previously exiled to the frontier had been sent instead to the punishment office. Another half year passed. It had been 14 years since Chun Yang entered the punishment office, and spring had arrived. That night, as the hour of Z approached around 11 p.m., the candlelight flickered in the study of the director of the punishment office. Chun Yang held a writing brush and was copying the treatise of the Most High on action and response. Half an hour later, after finishing copying the scripture, his spiritual cultivation increased by 2 months. Chun Yang then took out another piece of rice paper and began copying the precepts on lust from the Wenchang Emperor. By day, he punished demons. By night, he copied scriptures. Though it was tiring, his cultivation grew rapidly. He now had nearly 3,000 years of cultivation. This year, punishing demons had earned him many spells, some of which sounded quite impressive. Unfortunately, he had never fought anyone with them, so it was hard to gauge his true strength. Director Chun, the archives from the past 3 days have been delivered. Suddenly, a voice came from outside the study. Chun Yang's heart stirred, and he put away the scripture he was copying. Seeing the lamp burning in the study, 2 clerical officers opened the door and brought in the archives. Director Chun, please review them first. If there are no issues, we will send them to the right deputy director. As he spoke, a military clerk handed over the roster. Just as Chun Yang was about to look through it, the clerk slapped his forehead and pulled out a letter from his chest, handing it to Chun Yang. Silly me, I almost forgot the letter. Who sent this letter? Chun Yang glanced at the envelope in his hand. There was no name written on it, only the words, to be opened personally by Chun Yang. The official from a civil department said the letter was sent by a chiliarch in the military. A chiliarch? Chun Yang murmured to himself. He didn't know anyone in the military, let alone a chiliarch. After thinking back and forth and failing to guess who it was, he simply opened it to take a look. 14 years have passed in a flash. Not hearing from you, Brother Chun, but learning you are well fills my heart with joy. I wish I could visit you immediately, but I regret being stationed in the camp and receiving orders to go south to manage the flood disaster. The letter was not long, a few hundred characters, written crookedly with many wrong characters and ink blots. Qinyang read it word by word. Through the letter, it was as if he could see a man in armor holding a writing brush in his large hand, reluctantly writing this letter. When the flood is subdued next year, I will visit you in the capital, Brother Chun, and we will drink to our heart's content. The letter was signed, left by Zhang Xingzhou. Zhang Xingzhou was a year younger than him. Originally a beggar who had fled famine to Chong'an County at the age of 8, in early winter, there was a heavy snow, and he almost froze to death on the street corner. After seeing this, he had the servants bring Zhang Xingzhou back to the Chun residence. Since the two were close in age, he planned to make Zhang Xingzhou his study boy, so that he could legitimately stay in the Qin residence. Who knew that Zhang Xingzhou was completely ignorant of literary studies, but had remarkable talent in martial arts. He was immediately favored by the Chan residence's guest official, who insisted on taking him as a disciple no matter what. Upon hearing that he no longer had to beg for a living and could also practice martial arts, Zhang Xingzhou agreed without hesitation. Time flew by. The boy who had once been determined to become a general survived the demons and became a chiliarch. The corners of Chun Yang's mouth lifted slightly, and he seemed to be in a very good mood. Closing the letter, Chun Yang picked up the register of demon cultivators. He glanced over it roughly, but his gaze was caught by a name, and a hint of strangeness appeared on his face. Cell number 1 of Section C, I will personally administer the punishment. The two martial officials exchanged a glance, their expressions somewhat puzzled. It should be noted that Chun Yang never personally punished prisoners from Section B or below, yet today he specifically called for a cell in Section C. Soon after, the two left the study and curiously glanced at the file for cell number 2, Section C, only to see the name line conspicuously written. The words Han Qing. 1 day later, with a dull thud, the door to cell number 1, Section C opened. Chun Yang stepped inside, and the door slowly closed again. On the execution platform, Han Qing was dressed in tattered prison clothes, covered in wounds and dripping with blood, looking utterly miserable. Vice Minister Han, we meet again. Chun Yang stood with his hands behind his back, in front of Han Qing, sizing up this old acquaintance whom he hadn't seen for another year. Director Chun. Han Qing opened his swollen eyes. Though his vision was blurry, he could still recognize Chun Yang's striking white hair. You shouldn't have come to this cell. Han Qing gave a bitter smile. An old friend is about to leave. How could I not see him off? Coming to the punishment department as a hard laborer is not necessarily a death sentence, but being thrown into the prison cell is definitely a dead end. And it seems that Han Qing has already been tortured. How'd he get in this time? The feudal prince in the southern border has rebelled. This time, I've chosen the wrong side again. At this point, Han Qing paused and changed the subject, saying, It's not up to me which side I stand on. Do you regret it? No regrets. Han Qing shook his head, his expression remarkably calm. He looked at Chun Yang and suddenly smiled, saying, I am the youngest vice minister in the history of the Ministry of Revenue. Why would I regret? The life I've lived these past few years has been more exhilarating than many people's entire lifetimes. Even though he was sent from the Ministry of Justice to the Punishment Division, Han Qing remained composed, merely reminiscing about those years. Vice Minister Han, you've been a torturer, you should know the methods of the Punishment Division. Chun Yang's eyes flickered. He had read Han Qing's file. The crimes were severe. Relying on his position as Vice Minister of Revenue, he embezzled treasury silver to aid a prince's rebellion. Besides that, he committed many other offenses, filling the entire file with dense records. If Han Qing were an immortal who couldn't withstand the torture instruments of Category A, he would definitely have been assigned to Category A. Although the Vice Minister has great power, he couldn't embezzle from the treasury on his own after all. There's still Minister Li above Han Qing. This matter has nothing to do with Minister Li. Han Qing's tone was resolute without even thinking. He knew what was written in the dossier. Chun Yang wanted to torture information out of him. If he had wanted to confess, he would have done so in the Ministry of Justice. Why wait until being thrown into the punishment department? He, Han Qing, might not be a gentleman, but he was by no means a base villain. Then don't blame me. Chen Yang's expression was calm. He turned around and picked up a torture knife. Even if Han Qing wouldn't speak, he had to interrogate otherwise. His position as chief of the punishment department was as good as over. Chen Yang placed the first cut on Han Qing's hand, slowly peeling off the nail, then drove in silver needles. Han Qing held out for less than a quarter hour before screaming in agony. After half an hour, Chen Yang withdrew the knife. Vice Minister Han, if you speak now, you can spare yourself a lot of pain. Hearing this, Han Qing slightly raised his head, his murky eyes fixed on Chen Yang. After a few seconds of silence, the corners of his mouth curled into a sinister smile. Chief Chen, have you ever scattered gold into a river? Facing the waves, basket after basket of golden leaves, it was truly magnificent. Why bother? Chen Yang silently shook his head. He had to admit he had truly underestimated Han Qing. Even placed in the Jiazi division, Han Qing was definitely a tough nut to crack. You must know that rebellion is a crime punishable by execution of the entire clan. Even if we have some friendship, I cannot help you. That feudal prince absolutely did not rebel for personal gain. Han Qing frowned deeply, spat out the blood from his throat. After a moment's pause, he looked up at Chen Yang, and his weak voice carried a hint of pleading. Director Chen, I have a peculiar item. Could you help me fulfill a wish? I'll tell you where I hid that peculiar item. He had once been a cruel torturer himself, and knew that if another torturer administered the punishment, he might still be able to muddle through. But if Chen Yang personally tortured him, he absolutely couldn't endure it. Chen Yang was silent for a few breaths, then put down the torture instrument he had just picked up and instead took up the execution knife. An hour later, Han Qing died with a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Chen Yang, expressionless, flipped through the completed case files. This is a world that judges by appearances. Han Qing passed the imperial examination at 20 and became a presented scholar. But because of his looks, he lost the title of Tanhua third place in the first rank. His official career experienced many twists and turns, and he was nearly expelled from the capital region. Fortunately, 2 years later, he happened to meet Minister Li of the Ministry of Revenue. Whether out of pity or not, Minister Li brought Han Qing into the Ministry of Revenue, where over the next 10+ years Han Qing rose steadily to the position of vice minister. Even if you don't speak of it, Minister Li still cannot escape having his posthumous reputation tarnished even further. Chen Yang shook his head and added Minister Li's name to the dossier. Since the man has already been sent to the punishment department, what use is it for Han Qing to remain silent about Minister Li? Even if he doesn't add this dossier, the moment he leaves the punishment department, Minister Li's name will still appear on it. Moreover, most of the charges will be pinned on Minister Li. From Han Qing's mouth, he learned many things. A traitor emerged among the rebel prince's subordinates. No sooner had they discussed the rebellion that very night than the traitor was tricked out of the city and killed the next morning. This is the price of trying to match the heavens. The prince died, but the sky remained that of Great Xia. A year ago, that great Confucian scholar did the same. He entered the imperial palace alone, never expecting to leave the capital, only wanting to say and curse everything he had to say and curse. The Great Xia dynasty has been plagued by turmoil every few years, yet it has somehow weathered a century of storms. My cultivation is too low now, I won't dwell on such matters. Chen Yang flicked his sleeves and left. Today, the first grade cell had locked away 3 demonic cultivators. Demon elimination granted the Supreme Lord's pillow scripture. Demon elimination granted the 5 elements great escape. Demon elimination granted the peerless armory case. Interrogating Han Qing yielded no white vapor falling into the 8 trigrams furnace, but each of the next 3 surprised Chen Yang. The scripture goes without saying it's a fine method for cultivation. The 5 elements great escape is one of the 36 celestial arts. It is not merely an escape technique, but also encompasses the profound power of the 5 elements immortal arts. Most disciples of the Jie sect are proficient in the 5 escapes and the 3 elimination arts. For instance, Zhao Gongming, with his formidable magical power, could move mountains and drain seas. Among these, the 5 escapes refer to the 5 elements great escape. As for the 3 elimination arts, he was unclear. Chen Yang waved his right hand, and a black wooden case appeared in his palm. This was the peerless armory case. Impervious to water and fire, immune to blades and spears all divine weapons under heaven can be stored within. The item was indeed fine, but he didn't have a single weapon in hand. What was the point of giving him an armory case first? There will be in the future, Chun Yang said comfortingly, putting the Wushuang weapon case into his sleeve, pondering how to fulfill Han Qing's wish. After all, they had crossed paths. If he could help, he would. It was definitely not because he coveted the strange object Han Qing mentioned. The next day, Chun Yang made an excuse, saying he had achieved cultivation success and needed to go into seclusion for a few days, leaving all matters of the punishment of evil department to the right vice director. Krun technique. Chun Yang formed hand seals, and as his mana surged, a human figure condensed. In appearance, it looked exactly like him, but a closer look at its eyes revealed some differences. The gaze was hollow, lacking much intelligence. This technique was not the clone technique of the 72 earthly Sha arts, but merely a minor spell sharing the same name. It was enough for putting on a show. Chun Yang placed the clone in a secret room, then formed hand seals for the 5 elements Great Escape, using the Earth Escape technique to silently pass through the array covering the punishment of evil department, heading straight outside the capital. A day later, 900 li from the capital, there was a mountain 1,000 zhang high. The further up, the steeper it became, and the peak seemed like a sharp sword piercing straight into the clouds. At the foot of the mountain stood a towering stone tablet, on which were carved in a flowing, vigorous script, Heavenly Shu Mountain. Below these 3 characters were densely packed, small inscriptions. What? A Confucian scholar named Su Feng has been here? The roaming Taoist left his mark Master Qingxiu is here. Chun Yang looked at the celestial Shu Mountain, then at the stone tablet, and couldn't help but shake his head silently. It seems people are the same everywhere. Even the lofty ones can't resist such things. Han Qing had told him that beneath the stone tablet on celestial Shu Mountain, a bronze box was hidden. The rare item inside was for him, while the rest was to be delivered to a relative. With that thought, Chun Yang formed a hand seal and stamped his foot, releasing a strand of earth elemental energy into the ground, bringing up the bronze box buried beneath the stone tablet. Bronze is gold in color, turning green only after a long time. Judging by the look of it, this bronze box had been buried for no more than 3 months. Chun Yang opened it and found inside 200 taels of gold, a letter, and a purple gourd with a jade inlaid stopper, carved with a military pattern very exquisite. This must be the rare item Han the Fatty mentioned. Chun Yang raised an eyebrow, picked up the gourd, and shook it, sensing something inside. He opened it and brought it close to his nose, realizing it contained wine. The rich aroma of the wine hit his nose, making his mouth water. Nectar of the gods couldn't compare. Chun Yang took a sip from the gourd. The wine was mellow, fiery on the way down, with a lingering aftertaste. No wonder everyone who made it in the Ministry of Revenue was a shrewd operator. Chun Yang waved his sleeve to put the items away, then cast an earth escape spell to head for Han Qing's ancestral home. Han Qing had tricked him. This gourd was hardly a rare treasure, but the trip wasn't a total loss after acquiring the sleeve universe technique. He happened to need a gourd to refine into a magical artifact. As dusk approached, wisps of cooking smoke rose from a remote village. After arriving, Chun Yang searched for a while before finally locating Han Qing's ancestral home. Chun Yang knocked on the courtyard gate, muttering under his breath, "The people in this village are really strange." He just wanted to ask for directions, but the villagers hid as soon as they saw him, and those coming toward him turned and ran away. He wasn't some villainous demonic cultivator. Why were they so afraid? "Who's knocking?" Creak. The old, shabby courtyard door was pushed half open. A child first poked his head out, curiously sizing him up, then turned back and said in a babyish voice, "Grandpa, it's a demonic cultivator at the door." Chun Yang, the demon hunter, subconsciously glanced back, but there was no one behind him. "A demon hunter wouldn't knock," the child said. "Don't talk nonsense." The door swung open as a white-haired old man furrowed his brow and scolded the child. The youngster looked up, about to speak, but suddenly flinched so hard he nearly fell flat on the ground. "Grandpa, I told you it's a demon hunter who came exactly like you said last night." "Shut up, child," the old man barked, then turned to Chun Yang with a grim expression. This child has always been blunt with his words. "Please don't take offense, immortal master. Please don't take offense." The old man muttered, "Immortal master," yet cold sweat dripped from his forehead. Chun Yang fell silent. Only then did the penny drop the child had been calling him a demon hunter. How could he, a punisher of demon hunters, be a demon hunter himself? Old sir, don't worry. My name is Chen Yang, a friend of Han Qing. I happen to be passing by, so Han Qing asked me to deliver a few things. A friend of Qing, do come in quickly. Upon hearing this, the old man turned from surprise to delight and quickly invited Chen Yang into the yard. The child kept staring at Chen Yang with curiosity, but whenever Chen Yang looked over, the child would hastily look away. There were many scholars in the Great Xia, and with many scholars came many miscellaneous books. Chen Yang had read quite a few such books before, and the demons and Taoists depicted in them indeed seemed to look like him. How many of those who wrote such miscellaneous books had actually seen demons and Taoists? Chen Yang shook his head inwardly. He had suffered the consequence of being new to the world. No wonder the villagers avoided him when he asked for directions. If he had known, he would have used a disguise spell. Han Qing had always been an honest and timid child since he was little. Yes, timid and honest. The old man was very enthusiastic, pulling Chen Yang to ask about this and that. From their conversation, Chen Yang learned that the old man was Han Qing's uncle, named Han Sheng, and the child was his grandson. Chen Yang originally planned to leave after delivering the items, but Han Sheng insisted he stay for a meal. Unable to refuse, Chen Yang had to stay. The grandfather and grandson had only cooked a pot of rice porridge. After Chen Yang arrived, Han Sheng went to a hunter's house in the village and brought back a pot of freshly stewed meat. Please don't mind this simple fare, Lord Chen. Han Sheng, being of simple nature, ladled out the thickest congee from the bottom of the pot for Chen Yang. He had learned of Chen Yang's identity, a director of the Jingqi Demon Slaying Bureau. He didn't know how high that rank was, but he'd heard Chen Yang specialized in interrogating demonic cultivators. A good official who rids the people of harm. By the way, Lord Chen, how is Han Qing doing in Jingqi? I heard he's become a high official. Brother Han, you're right, he is indeed a high official. Xian Yang nodded, reluctant to the chief Han Sheng. He took out the 200 taels of gold and the letter Han Qing had written in advance. Brother Han holds several posts and couldn't get away, so he entrusted me to deliver this letter and some money. So Xiaoping has truly made something of himself. Han Sheng's face wrinkled into a smile as he took the letter with both hands, repeatedly thanking Chen Yang. He picked up a gold ingot and immediately tried to press it into Chen Yang's hands. Is this the residence of the Vice Minister Han? Suddenly, a vigorous voice came from outside the courtyard. Chen Yang turned to look and saw a young man in a long gown, with a refined and courteous demeanor, standing at the courtyard gate. Hearing this, Han Sheng quickly nodded in agreement. Although the man outside the door was plainly dressed, he seemed extraordinary. He spoke Han Qing's name as soon as he opened his mouth. The two must have known each other. Did Han Qing send you? Please come in quickly. The man outside the door smiled and was about to enter the yard when he caught sight of Chen Yang holding a bowl of congee, muttering to himself. Someone beat me to it. Brother, I didn't expect you to arrive faster than me. The man clasped his hands, his gaze fixed intently on Chen Yang. Chen Yang set down the bowl of congee, flicked his sleeves, stood up, and glanced back at Han Sheng before speaking softly. Old Han, I'll step out of the yard with this brother for a word. Before Han Sheng could respond, Chen Yang walked up to the man and whispered, moving his lips so only the two of them could hear. You're too late. Everything Han Qing hid is with me. Brother, it's not a good habit to hog all the spoils. The man frowned slightly, a thoughtful expression on his face, as if trying to figure out Chen Yang's identity. There are quite a few eyes on this place. Let's talk somewhere else. Chen Yang's voice was low and hoarse. As he walked out of the yard, he turned back to glance at the man, his pupils flickering. In his sight, the originally refined-looking man turned ferocious, with black chi swirling around his head and countless vengeful spirits lingering without dispersing. Most demon cultivators were men who appeared more righteous than the next, and women more beautiful than the next. How could they be like what was written in idol books? However, there were a few exceptions. This demon cultivator perhaps mistook him for a demon cultivator who did not like to hide his true face. Chen Yang took a step. It seemed slow, but in reality, he was already 100 zhang away. Such high cultivation. The man's gaze turned serious. After a slight hesitation, he still followed. Although he could follow behind Chen Yang, he was far less at ease. Before long, A thin sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead. "Grandpa, when will Lord Chen come back?" Han Tong held a bowl of porridge, staring longingly at a pot of meat. "Eat up, child. Lord Chen will not come back." "Then when will Uncle Han come back?" "Your Uncle Han will not come back either." Han Sheng shook his head. His dry, tree-like hand clenched the letter written by Han Qing. He glanced sideways toward the distant horizon. His messy white brows were knitted together, and his aged, pale eyes made it impossible to tell what he was thinking. He had also ventured out in his youth. Later, his elder brother and sister-in-law died of illness, leaving behind Han Qing, who was less than 2 years old. Tired of wandering, he returned to the village, married, had children, and took care of Han Qing as if he were his own. Han Qing was a timid child even at 10 years old. He still dared not walk at night. Han Sheng muttered to himself. While the sun had not yet set, he opened the envelope and read it carefully. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth unconsciously, and a glimmer of relief appeared in his eyes. "Child, we will move away tomorrow." "No, we leave tonight." A quarter of an hour later, Chen Yang stopped in his tracks and turned around, seeing the long-robed man a zhang away from him, panting heavily. "You have impressive skills, Taoist." The long-robed man cupped his hands with a solemn expression. "To be able to use such spiritual power, you're at least a 4th-rank perfected cultivator, or perhaps a high 3rd-rank expert. I am Ming Sha of the Four Evil Sect." Chen Yang raised an eyebrow. He knew most of the demonic cults and heretical sects in Daxia. A month ago, he had interrogated a demonic cultivator from the Four Evil Sect. Does the Four Evil Sect have a demonic cultivator called Ghost Infantryman?